Think about this. The House Oversight Committee meeting was already an hour behind schedule, and most people were starting to lose interest. The atmosphere was full of red tape, but then Representative Jasmine Crockett did something no one saw coming. She leaned forward, calmly took off her glasses, and asked for silence. The room was quiet. It wasn't only quiet for the hearing, it was quiet for tradition and what people felt they knew. The air felt thicker as Crockett spoke more quietly. "I want to change the subject to something that has to do with character," she said, looking down at the panel as if she already knew what kind of trouble she was about to get into. She spoke in a certain way on purpose. Every syllable impacted her harder than the last, and the room appeared to get smaller. She stated, "This country has spent years protecting power over truth, and that ends today." The people on the committee changed around in their chairs. You could feel the stress. Chairperson Ruben Geller seemed anxious and didn't know what was going to happen next. Crockett was no longer sticking to the script. She was about to do something the country wasn't ready for. Then she said something shocking. She continued, "There are sealed papers from an Arizona court from 2019," as she flipped through her files. Files that were hidden and buried because of politics. These files had to do with President Trump, a former staff member, and a child. The room got even quieter. She stopped for a moment to let her words hang in the air. The camera zoomed in on the photocopy she was holding up. It was a file with the line's paternity agreement enforced under non-disclosure. DNA confirmation pending. There was no sound in the room. She went on, "I have a sworn affidavit from a federal contractor who was in charge of digitally shredding files flagged under the White House Correspondence Protection Act. One file was different. It mentioned a $3.1 million payment to a woman with the alias TB. Crockett's eyes were fixed on the panel, and they didn't move. She didn't raise her voice, but every word hit like a thunderclap. If the president knew during his first term that Barron Trump was not biologically his and buried that information to protect his image, we have a problem, she said. And it's not just legal, it's moral. The room seemed to hold its breath. Representative Matt Overby tried to interrupt and ask if it was the correct moment to talk about this. Crockett didn't flinch or pause. The people didn't vote for secrecy, they voted for representation. As she spoke, the weight of her words sank further and deeper into the brains of everyone who heard them. What she had just said wasn't just about politics. It was about honesty, about what was hidden in the shadows, and about what the public had a right to know. There were whispers on the committee. Some members laughed and others raised their eyebrows in surprise, but Crockett kept her own. "We will not silence the truth just because it makes the powerful uncomfortable," she said. At that point, it wasn't just a hearing, it was an explosion. Newsrooms all over the country picked it up right away. CNN cut to live coverage, and MSNBC did the same. Even Fox couldn't look away. Phones all over the country buzzed as people started to ask one question. Did Jasmine Crockett just say Barron isn't Trump's son? Overby slapped his pen down in anger, signaling that the meeting should end. But Crockett wasn't done. She raised her voice for the first time. "We're not talking about gossip. We're talking about justice being used for personal protection. Let's keep the child out of this," Representative Eleanor Vance said, trying to change the subject. But Crockett wouldn't back down. "You want to protect a youngster? Then stop using him as a tool for power," she shot back. Everyone in the room was furious. The cameras caught every moment. But then something weird happened. The live stream stopped for more than 3 minutes. People watching thought it was a technical problem. But when the broadcast came back, it was evident that the damage had already been done. Every major news outlet had the leak, and social media was going crazy. TikTok videos of the event went viral. Headlines screamed, "Jasmine Crockett drops bombshell about Barron Trump's paternity." Phones were ringing off the hook. Everyone in the country was talking about it. That night, network ratings hit new highs. Crockett's remarks had an impact. The media couldn't stop talking about it, and viewers couldn't stop watching. But things weren't tranquil inside the White House, even though the country was humming. A junior staffer in the West Wing spilled iced coffee all over a printer, but no one noticed. Everyone was focused on the muted TV in the Roosevelt room. President Trump had just stepped in and waved off aides, but when he saw Crockett's face on the screen, he stopped. Trump pointed to the TV and exclaimed, "What is this? Why is it on every resto channel?" No one answered quickly enough. Trump was clearly angry. He turned to his chief of staff, Brian Halford, and said, "Brian, what the hell is going on?" Halford thought for a moment. "She brought up sealed files about Barron Trump," he remarked in a low voice. Trump's face twisted in shock and disbelief. "What did she do?" The room held its breath. "Give me the network right now," Trump shouted. "Put me on the phone with CNN right now." Halford started his mouth to say something, but then he closed it. "Sir, we might need to be smart about how we deal with this," he murmured slowly. Trump glared at him. "She just said on live TV that Barron is not my son, and you want strategy?" His voice got louder with rage. "I want a statement. We sue her. We sue CNN. We sue everyone." Hope Sinclair, Trump's personal lawyer, calmly said, "Sir, defamation doesn't hold if it's true." Trump didn't say anything. He didn't have to. His quiet said a lot. Halford said, "Do we know what she has?" "We don't know, but it's already out," he said. "Every outlet has picked it up. Not a single news outlet hasn't covered it. TikTok has clips from 4 different angles." As he looked at the screen, Trump's fingers shook. He wasn't just angry, he was terrified. He knew this wasn't going to go away. Halford went on, "We need to take charge of the next 24 hours. This could become the issue of the election." Trump's face got rigid and he sank into his chair. He wasn't paying attention to the strategies anymore. He was thinking about something else. Sinclair's remarks pierced through the air. "The NDA is binding, but if Crockett got that affidavit, it means someone inside leaked it. We need to find that leak right away." Trump didn't want to worry about that. He said, "Leave Barron out of this." But Sinclair wasn't done. "The press won't," she said quietly. Halford stood still and looked at Trump. "You know this will become the story if we don't take charge of it, right?" Trump nodded a little, but his mind was somewhere. It was a dark place, a place where memories of mistakes from the past stayed. It was a place where winning was more important than anything else, even if it meant hurting the people he loved the most. A woman named Lorna Peake was filling up her gas tank in a parking lot in Ohio when she noticed an alert on her phone about Crockett's discovery. She stopped because there was something about the calmness in Crockett's voice that made her stop. She pushed play. The cashier at a tiny store had CNN on. By the time Crockett said the word paternity, everyone was listening. The news had spread. The truth had come out. And it wasn't going back. As Jasmine Crockett spoke, her words didn't just land. They exploded. Denzel Yates, a 19-year-old Apple Store worker in Seattle, couldn't believe what he was hearing. Worker Dana paused mid-bite of her leftover Thai food. "Wait, is she saying Trump's not the dad?" she asked, shocked. Denzel was just as shocked. "She didn't say it directly," he said, "but she showed it." Clips of Crockett's shocking revelation were all over TikTok, and the original live stream had over 2.3 million views in less than an hour. The hashtag #NotHisSon was trending around the world by 4 p.m. Right below it was hashtag #CrockettTruth. Everyone was talking about it. In Mesa, Arizona, a high school junior named Joaquin argued with his history teacher, Mrs. Roach. "Does this even matter?" Joaquin asked. "It's his personal life." Mrs. Roach shook her head. "If the documents are real, it's not just personal. It's deception tied to public trust. If you cover up something this big, you don't stop there." Cal, a retired Marine, watched Fox News in his den in rural Pennsylvania. He didn't say anything, but his wife, Teresa, whispered, "What if it's true?" Cal didn't answer. The air was thick with uncertainty. Outside a barber shop in Tallahassee, phones were passed around. One man in a Raptors jersey asked, "Do you think she made it up?" The barber shook his head slowly. "Nah, that woman ain't flinching. You saw her face." Hours later, opinion polls showed a surprising shift. A flash survey by DataPulse revealed that 48% of people believed Crockett's claim, 33% didn't, and 19% were unsure. In a country divided on nearly everything, those numbers were a landslide. CNN replayed the footage every hour. MSNBC brought in legal analysts. Even Newsmax had to acknowledge the storm, though they tried to spin it as a political ambush. But across TikTok and Instagram, Crockett's image was being rebranded in real time. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's media team was working hard behind the scenes. His press secretary put out a boring statement accusing Crockett of reckless character assassination, but it didn't get much attention. By this point, people weren't just focusing on the claim. They were also wondering why Crockett had said it now. Some thought it was planned, while others thought it was spontaneous. But the real conversation wasn't about timing. It was about truth. Bianca Ford said it best for her Gen Z audience that night on a Milwaukee podcast. If she's lying, she's cooked. But if she's not lying, then the President of the United States used his power to hide a child's identity for years. That's not gossip. That's corruption. Crockett didn't send out a follow-up press release or conduct a news conference, even though the country was buzzing. Instead, she tweeted at 8:12 p.m. Truth has a way of surfacing when it's ready. The White House, on the other hand, was anything but calm. Crockett walked into CNN's downtown D.C. studio at almost 9:30 p.m. She looked tired, but also like someone who knew this moment was far from over. She didn't have an entourage or flashy jewelry, just a navy blue blazer, a clean ponytail, and a folder under her arm. Inside the studio, producers rushed around, knowing this wasn't just another interview. It was the most watched interview of the year. Anderson Paak smiled stiffly and said, "Congresswoman Crockett, thank you for taking the time to meet with us." Crockett nodded quietly and said, "I won't be long. I just want to be clear." When the camera started rolling, there was no music or clever transition, just her face, eyes steady and unflinching. Paak tried to ease in by saying, "You caused a political earthquake today, Congresswoman. Some say you crossed the line. Others say you revealed what many were too afraid to touch. Can you explain why today was the day?" Crockett didn't think twice. "I wasn't elected to keep a man's secrets. I was elected to protect the people's right to know the truth, even if it makes them uncomfortable." Paak looked down at his papers, unsure of what to do next. "You talked about sealed documents and a supposed payment related to Barron Trump's birth. Do you have those files?" "I've seen them," Crockett said with confidence. "I have access through a whistleblower who wants to stay anonymous. I'm working with lawyers to figure out what can be made public without putting their safety at risk." Paak asked again, "Are you saying that President Trump knowingly hid the truth about Barron being his son to protect his public image?" Crockett leaned in. "I'm saying that all the evidence I've looked at strongly supports that conclusion. I'm also saying that his administration used the tools of government, such as NDA threats, legal tricks, and hush money, to keep it hidden." Producers were watching the social media feeds from behind the scenes and seeing their app crash from too much traffic. They hadn't seen numbers like this since election night in 2020. Paak, who was clearly getting more uneasy, sought to shift the conversation. Satan said. Crockett quietly cut in, "I'm not." Paak, who was clearly upset, tried to change the subject. "A lot of critics say this puts a child in the public crossfire. It's not fair to Barron Trump." Crockett nodded sadly. "I agree. It's not fair. But I didn't put him there. That's his father's fault. When you lied to the country to keep your house in order, it's your roof that falls, not mine." Her voice never became louder. It didn't have to. Paak pushed again. "Do you think this news will change the election?" Crockett said, "No. I think it changes how we see character, and that's more important." Trump's media staff was furious back at the White House. They didn't expect her to go live so quickly, and they certainly didn't expect her to sound so calm, controlled, and unwavering. She didn't appear like she was going crazy. She looked like she knew a lot more than she was saying. The CNN tape went viral, getting over 12 million views in less than an hour. The Baltimore Ledger tweeted, "Whether you believe her or not, Jasmine Crockett came to the fight with receipts and a straight spine." This wasn't just a leak, it was a warning. By midnight, other representatives were being asked where they stood. Some refused to comment, while a few tried to avoid the question. But Representative Lynette O'Connor from Oregon shocked everyone when she said, "I've seen parts of what Representative Crockett talked about, and I believe she's telling the truth." That comment caused another online eruption. It wasn't just Crockett who had seen it. Someone else had too. Crockett was back in her Arlington apartment. She didn't answer any more calls or check Twitter. She just sat on her couch with her shoes on and stared at the folder in front of her. Inside were the rest of the documents. Some she hadn't talked about yet, and some she hoped she wouldn't have to. But if she had to, she was ready. Genevieve Larson, a 51-year-old nurse, had just gotten home from an overnight shift in a quiet part of El Sereno, California. Her neighbor ran up to her with a phone in hand and exclaimed, "You need to see this." Genevieve looked at the screen. The next thing she saw would change everything. Genevieve Larson's heart raced as she watched the clip. It wasn't the Genevieve Larson's heart raced as she watched the clip. It wasn't the headline or the drama that shocked her. It was the name. Jasmine Crockett, calm and collected, called a woman TB. Genevieve's chest tightened. That wasn't just a random name. It was hers. Talia Breyer, the name she had used in court, was now exposed to the whole country. Her secret, which was protected by a court order, was no longer just hers to keep. Genevieve locked the door, drew the blinds, and turned on the burner phone she had hidden for years. The screen blinked with 4 missed calls and 1 voicemail. She hit play. It was her lawyer, Harris Noland. "Genevieve, I know you've seen it. Don't answer anything. I'm on the next flight. We knew this day might come. Just sit tight." As she sat down at the kitchen table, her hands shook. The silence was deafening. Her son was away at college, and for the first time in years, she wished he were there, not because she needed protection, but because she didn't want to go through this alone. By lunchtime, her name still hadn't come up, but the vultures were already circling. Paparazzi were parked 2 blocks away. One guy even pretended to be a delivery driver, while another slipped a note under her garage door that said, "We know who you are. Talk to us first. Name your price." Genevieve didn't answer, not yet. Her mind drifted back to 2005, to a hotel suite in Phoenix where it all began. She had been a young, ambitious surgical tech who believed in second chances. A friend of a friend introduced her to Trump at a benefit dinner. He wasn't charming, at least not in the way she expected, but he was persuasive. He made her feel like saying no would be the biggest mistake of her life. 8 months later, she had a baby and a secret that could ruin everything. When she told Trump, he brushed her off. "I'm not the guy," he said with a smirk. Then came the lawyers, then the agreement. He never signed the birth certificate, but he signed the check and the NDA. The money was meant to give her a fresh start, a new city, a new life. And for a while, it almost worked. But now Jasmine Crockett had said her name. Across the country, Crockett's team was already getting in touch with the right people. It was a secure line, so there was no pressure, just a heads up. Reporters were digging. A DC outlet had already narrowed it down to 5 women, all of whom were getting calls. Genevieve knew it was only a matter of time before her name came out. By mid-afternoon, her lawyer, Harris, had come and was sitting across from her at the same kitchen table where she used to assemble lunches for her son. "They're going to try to break you," he warned. "I know," she said softly, "but you don't have to give them anything." Genevieve looked him in the eye and replied, "I owe her something," meaning Crockett. Harris nodded, showing that he understood. Genevieve went to the cabinet, took out a red folder, and put it on the table. It held copies of the original court file, emails from Trump's legal team, and proof of the request for a paternity test that Trump had never answered. She replied, "I don't want to go on TV. I don't want interviews. I just want the truth to be known." Harris looked at her and said, "Let's do it your way." A written statement somewhere that won't change it. The Ledger. The Guardian. Somewhere trustworthy. Genevieve nodded. "And I want them to know that I didn't ask for this, but I'm not going to act like it didn't happen." Genevieve's name hadn't broken yet by the end of the day, but the proper people knew who she was. A Washington Post reporter asked for a comment at 7:02 p.m. After 10 minutes, a second message came in. "We know you're the woman Jasmine talked about. I'd like to hear what you have to say before someone else does it for you." Genevieve shut her laptop. She would make her choice tomorrow. But as soon as she got her voice back, experienced journalist Conrad Wells spotted a trail that no one else had seen. It was halfway across the country. Conrad peered at his computer screen in a small newsroom in downtown St. Louis. He wasn't young, showy, or part of the online viral scene, but the Crockett story spoke to him in some way. Not the drama, but the quiet moments between the noise, the portions that no one was looking for. He opened a folder on his desktop called NDA Pattern 2017 and cracked his knuckles. Conrad had written about Trump for years, but in a different way. He wasn't watching the cable news circus, he was looking for patterns. Payments, real estate registrations, and offshore trusts. When Crockett's comments came out, something clicked. 5 years ago, he had highlighted a modest wire transfer that didn't appear important from a Trump-linked shell firm to an Arizona-based LLC called Red Lantern Diagnostics. No one cared back then, but now it was important. He typed fast, "Arizona Red Lantern Diagnostics, medical tests for paternity." 2019 court filings. A public court record came up. There was a motion filed with the initials TB on the docket, but much of it was sealed. Against J.D. Trump. There was no ruling. The complaint was dropped and a notification of private resolution was sent. Conrad sat up straighter. He asked an old courthouse clerk for a favor, and the clerk confirmed that there was an affidavit attached and sealed within 3 hours of filing. "Who else has asked about it today?" Conrad inquired. "Lawyers." "Private ones," she said, confirming his suspicion. Crockett's squad had stopped talking, which was smart and savvy. But Conrad realized that didn't mean he couldn't discover the edges. He called a person he knew who worked for a medical courier service in Tempe, Arizona. In 2019, they used to cooperate with private labs. One of their drivers had picked up something from Red Lantern Diagnostics and was taking it to D.C. overnight. Who sent it? Genevieve Larson. Conrad hadn't published it yet, but he had everything he needed: a name, a timeline, and a money trail. He sent an email to Crockett's office with only one line: "I know about Red Lantern." If this is real, it's not just a scandal, it's about how power is abused in the system. An hour later, he got a message back that said, "We are listening." Conrad leaned back in his chair. He didn't want to be the first, he just wanted to be right. He had the first draft of what would be the most popular piece of his career by 10:17 p.m. He didn't start with the money or the child. He started with this: "In a democracy, secrets rot us from the inside. This isn't about scandal, it's about a government that is built to bury the people it fears." By daybreak, the fuse was ready to burn through every news office in the country. But as Conrad got ready to publish, the White House was having trouble dealing with the aftermath. By 7 a.m., the West Wing was full of people trying to fix things. Legal aides ran from room to room. Some staff members were working nocturnal shifts and were too scared to change clothing. The whiteboard in the press office was cleaned, then filled again, and then cleaned again. No one knew which plan would work for more than 10 minutes. Trump hadn't said anything in public since Crockett's hearing, but he wasn't quiet at 16 Pennsylvania Avenue. He walked around the Roosevelt Room, yelling into a speakerphone, "Find out who that woman is. Crockett's source. I want everything about her, including her schoolwork." An aide said, "Sir, we think her name is Genevieve Larkinson." In 2010, she changed her name legally. There's a court document that isn't public. I don't care about the court, Trump said angrily. I care about the story. We find her. We don't believe her. Hope Sinclair and Brian Halford looked at one another, knowing that things were getting out of hand. It was no longer simply about one woman. It was about the machine that was made to keep the illusion safe. And then, at 8 in the morning, it happened. A muted but clear audio clip got out. Hope Sinclair said, "If the affidavit leaks, we're in trouble. We can't make excuses for avoiding paternity." The clip spread like crazy. Newsrooms rushed to check it out. The time frame matched up in less than an hour. A Fox reporter approached Sinclair in a hallway, and the floodgates were ready to explode. The truth was out. Things were moving quickly that morning, but Melania Trump stayed remarkably calm when she talked to her husband, who was still in Geneva for a youth wellness meeting. The encrypted video call seemed cooler than normal. "You said it was taken care of," she murmured, her voice quiet but far away. "It was handled," Trump said quietly, but there was no doubt that he was worried. Until that woman came back. Melania didn't move. "You should have told me the whole story, not just parts," she added, her lips squeezed together tightly as the weight of the situation sank in. Trump's voice got lower. "This doesn't have to change anything. Barron is still our son." But Melania's answer was short and to the point. "No, Donald, he's my son." The words hung in the air as the call ended. The press was surrounding Washington like sharks drawn to blood in the water. The White House press room was full with reporters who were hurling questions quicker than they could be answered. "Has the president read the affidavit that Jasmine Crockett talked about?" they inquired. "Did Donald Trump send in a DNA test in 2019? Did the government use internal pressure to stop court filings?" The press secretary tried to stay calm and read the same prepared statement. The president firmly denies any and all false claims about his family and sees these attacks as a shameful way to score political points. But the harm had already been done. Things were starting to fall apart inside the White House. People who were close to the president were starting to talk. A mid-level employee who didn't want to be named told the Philadelphia Review, "We've known about the Red File since 2020. The top right drawer of Helfer's cabinet held it. People who inquired about it were told to pay attention to the campaign. By lunchtime, the story was back on Twitter, and this time it was huge. People weren't just responding to the claims, they were picking sides." In conservative circles, people started to talk quietly. Republican strategist Janelle Christian told PBS, "This isn't about party anymore. This is about falsehoods protecting power. We need to address it head-on if Crockett's statements are true." The circle of trust was getting smaller and smaller inside the White House. Brian Halford had ceased accepting press calls completely, and Hope Sinclair was writing her resignation letter. Trump was the only one still trying to hold things together, but even he was starting to fall apart. He yelled instructions and demanded allegiance, but the people around him didn't just nod anymore. They paused. There was no way to put the truth back together once it started to come out, but the true bombshell wasn't buried in D.C. It was stashed in a judge's drawer in Phoenix, and it was about to come out. Judge Rosanna Vitelli sat in the dusty basement archives of the Maricopa County Family Court building and looked at an envelope that said confidential. It had been sealed for 5 years, but now it was ready to be unlocked. Judge Vitelli remembered the day it came, the hasty file, the panicked clerk, and the strange call from a senior federal judge telling her to keep it quiet for national security concerns. It seemed crazy at the time, but the pressure was real. Jerome Beck, who was then the Attorney General, signed the document. Judge Vitelli didn't ask any questions because she had learned how to read between the lines a long time ago. 5 years later, Jasmine Crockett made it public. The mail included the original paternity motion in it, which Genevieve Larson signed as Talia Breyer. There were 5 attachments inside. One was a court-ordered DNA request for Donald J. Trump, and the other 4 were responses from Trump's legal team, all of which said they couldn't meet the deadlines and asked for more time. The last one was a motion to dismiss based on extraordinary executive obligations, but the DNA result was clearly missing. The test never happened. Judge Vitelli picked up the phone and called a former clerk who is now a civil rights lawyer in Flagstaff. "Do you see what's going on TV?" she asked. "Do you remember that case from 2019? The one I told you about when we had drinks?" The voice on the other end said, "You kept that sealed." "I still have it." "Be quiet." "Are you thinking about opening it?" the lawyer inquired. Judge Vitelli took a deep breath. "I'm thinking about what I should have done back then, before the stress got to me." There was another story breaking in Phoenix. The Arizona Sentinel got a hold of an internal court memo from an unnamed source. It showed that Trump's lawyers had filed a protective objection to stop any DNA sample from being submitted. The memo was technical, but one paragraph stood out. Client explicitly refuses biological test. Counsel suggests different options for resolving the case, such as a private financial settlement, a media gag provision, or a rapid sealing. It was virtually exactly the same as what Crockett said. CNN cut off a live panel discussion in the middle of a sentence as soon as the Sentinel article hit. AW touched the wire. Anderson Pike was shocked and turned to the camera and said, "What did you say?" The voice on his headset said the Arizona judge asked for DNA. Trump didn't want to take the test. It never happened. The panel stopped talking. Pike said the words over and again, "No biological confirmation." There was no denial either. Just avoidance. In just a few minutes, no DNA was all over social media. People didn't need to know what legal terms meant. They knew how to avoid them, and it hurt. The walls shook again at the White House. Hope Sinclair had quit. Brian Halford was stuck in a room with Trump, attempting to explain how a 5-year-old document from a minor court in Arizona had made the headlines. Trump was very quiet now that he wasn't yelling. "How did they get that note?" he asked, staring blankly at the floor. Halford said, "They didn't. Someone let it out." The clerk was a lawyer. The judge might even be there. Trump grunted. "She said she would keep it secret." Halford didn't tell him that pledges didn't mean much when the truth was staring a judge in the face in her closing weeks on the bench. The mood changed all around the country. This wasn't a far-off controversy. It was real, dirty, and very human. A woman in Tulsa, Oklahoma said, "It's always the lies that get them, not the act," while she was getting her braids done. A college student in Minneapolis tweeted, "I don't care who the father is. I care that the president used the court system like a personal broom closet." Even some conservative voices were starting to fracture. A former Republican strategist stated on the radio, "I'm not saying it's true, but the way they're dancing around it, it doesn't seem good." The silence is louder than the accusation. At the same time, Judge Vitelli called Jasmine Crockett's office one last time. There was no voicemail or help. The call went straight to the Congresswoman. The judge remarked, "This is Rosanna Vitelli, Congresswoman Crockett. I have something you might like to see." As Crockett got ready for what came next, people all around the country were getting ready to choose sides, not only politically. When Good Morning America read the Arizona court memo live, it was more than simply the news. The whole country was living it. In Des Moines, Iowa, people used to talk about the weather and May's futures over breakfast. Now they argue over what it means to be lied to by the most powerful man in the country and what it means to be loyal. A younger man in a Carhartt hoodie and an older couple were fighting 2 booths away. The older man said as he stirred his coffee, "I don't care who fathered that boy. This smells like a smear job." The younger man leaned forward and raised his voice. You think he didn't stop the test? There are sealed files, NDAs, and other proof. The whole thing. He ran away from the truth, just like he runs away from everything else. In Mobile, Alabama, a church parking lot turned into an impromptu debating stage. "Turn on the TV," a deacon texted Pastor Carl Denson right after he finished his morning prayer. Crockett's face dominated the screen again as he did. This time, she was heading up the steps of the Capitol with 2 assistants on either side of her and a plain manila folder in their hand. The Washington Ledger said that by 10 a.m., the federal government had. Asked for further documents that Jasmine Crockett's team had mentioned to be made public, the motion's phrasing was precise, saying, "The matter now falls under national interest. Suppressing the truth under the guise of executive privilege is a violation of ethical governance." Voters reacted right away and loudly. People built their own signs and protested outside state houses in Utah, Missouri, and Pennsylvania, among other states. These protests were not planned. The stress was getting worse. The truth was coming out. But not all of the answers were positive about Crockett. After a local television station aired the memo headline, a pro-Trump gathering developed outside of it in Birmingham. A woman in a sequined flag blouse yelled over a megaphone, "This is what they do when they can't beat him at the polls. They attack the family." 30 minutes later, a college group in another part of town organized a silent march with signs that said "Truth over image" and "We deserve honest leaders." The divide was growing, but the fight for truth was only getting started. People were taking sides at coffee shops, classrooms, at work, even on buses. The country was split between honesty and loyalty. At the same time, in Gary, Indiana, Patrice Kinley, a single mother, and her 15-year-old daughter sat on the couch and watched the news. "Why didn't he just take the test?" her daughter asked softly. Patrice shook her head. "Baby, when people lie for long enough, even the truth starts to feel like a threat. The stakes were bigger than everyone thought. This wasn't just about a DNA test. It was about honesty and leadership." Hugo Brenn, a college lecturer in Philadelphia, hosted an open forum in his American ethics class. He scribbled on the board one question: "Does personal truth matter in public service?" What happened next was 3 hours of the most honest, real talk he had seen in years. One kid cried and another left in a rage. The talk was no longer about ideas. It was about real life. Crockett hadn't said anything since Judge Vitarelli called her. She was getting ready, both legally and emotionally. This wasn't merely a political revelation. It was about whether America had been living a lie for a long time. At a town hall meeting in Bakersfield, California, Representative Lynette O'Connor encountered a similar storm. A conservative voter yelled, "You people are tearing this country apart with gossip." O'Connor didn't yell back. She simply inquired, "Is it gossip if it's in a court file?" The voter didn't say anything. There was no longer a place for the truth to hide. The story even made it to the news in other countries. A British news announcer said it was the most important question of paternity since Jefferson. In Canada, late-night comedians walked a fine line between making fun of it and being amazed. One anchor in Brazil stated, "In America, power fears truth more than defeat." The world was watching, and the truth was coming out like never before. Something was changing in Washington. The polls. A fresh poll found that Crockett's popularity had gone up 18 points, especially among independents and people under 40. Trump's base stayed strong, but undecided voters were starting to lean towards what some people termed the honesty faction. The change was clear. The United States was no longer quiet. Crockett didn't conduct a press conference, but her team did tell the Columbus Herald that they now had Judge Vitarelli's envelope. People on social media reacted right away. "She's not done. She is merely getting the next shot ready." One response in a Facebook forum for political science majors stuck out: "Crockett's not taking him down with noise. She's taking him down with paperwork." The next move was coming. Crockett was getting ready for her last move while the whole country watched. It was one that was supposed to end the chapter clearly and with no room for doubt. The end was near. Jasmine Crockett got out of a silver vehicle around 3 p.m. and walked to the press conference podium outside the Capitol building. No TV crews had been told about it. There were no barricades or media wristbands, only a few dozen reporters who had come early because of a rumor that she was going to speak. Crockett didn't bring any helpers, sunglasses, or a lawyer with her. She only had the identical manila folder that everyone had seen her carry into the building that morning. The noise ceased when she got behind the mic. What would happen next would change everything. She started by saying, "My name is Jasmine Crockett. and I'm not going to say it again. I'm here to put a stop to the speculating. She took one sheet out of the folder and held it up. This is the original order for a DNA test from 2019, which was filed under seal by a state court. Never done. Never questioned in open court. Only buried. The cameras clicked. Reporters pushed themselves forward. What you've heard these past few days is not just theory. It's not a play. It's not a political play. It's a record that the people of the United States should have seen years ago. Someone yelled, "Congresswoman, are you giving out the whole affidavit?" Crockett stopped. "I'm giving it to the Public Record Office, the House Ethics Committee, and the DOJ. I won't take it out. I won't hide behind legal games." Another reporter questioned, "Are you worried that this will hurt you politically?" She smiled just a little bit. Truth doesn't hurt. It just burns where it needs to. The room got quiet again. It was clear what would happen next. That night, many news sources published the files in full, without any paywalls or spin. The NDA, the request for a DNA test, the missing court dates, the history of financial settlements, and the internal report that said Trump's legal team had told him to avoid it at all costs. There was no doubt about it now. He didn't just cover it up. He buried it under money and power. CNN showed a primetime story that night called The Truth Test, what Crockett's files show about power and protection. Then MSNBC aired The Price of Image, how silence served the presidency. Fox News, which was under pressure from leaks within the company, reluctantly hosted a debate about whether Trump's denials could still be accepted. The country was at a turning point. The truth had come out and things would never be the same. The effects were felt more than just cliques all around the country. In Lincoln, Nebraska, a middle school civics instructor changed his lesson plan after a student inquired, "Is it possible for a president to lie and still be a good leader?" A Republican councilwoman in Las Vegas said she was leaving a campaign group because I can't ask others to support a man who ran from a test my husband would have taken without blinking. Genevieve Larkinson eventually spoke in Baltimore. She sent the press a 2-page letter, but no cameras or interviews were allowed. Just words. "I didn't ask for this attention, but I'm not ashamed anymore," she added. "I stayed quiet because I thought it would keep my son safe, but I've learned that silence only keeps the wrong people safe." I appreciate Congresswoman Crockett for doing what I couldn't. Her son, who is now at college, made his own short statement. "My mom told the truth." That's all that counts. Crockett didn't show off, though. She didn't sign a book deal or ride the wave. She went back to work and introduced 2 new legislation in the House in a week. One would limit how much executives may influence in state-level court cases, and the other would make it possible to examine sealed settlements involving public officials. Neither one passed right away, but they were written down in ink during the day. And that meant something to a lot of Americans. The harm was permanent for Trump. He had hidden the truth for years, but now it was too late to fix what he had done. She never said, "I told you so," to Crockett. She just kept coming back, which was the objective all along. This wasn't about showing that someone was lying. It was about showing that the truth could still get through, even in the safest places of power, if someone was bold enough to stay still while the world shook. And as the camera faded from her last press conference, her words stayed, "You are what you show. You have to live with your truth." I didn't come to Congress to protect pictures. I come to honor the truth. If this story meant something to you, if it made you think, reflect, or even reconsider, subscribe for more. The stories we tell shape the world we live in. Let's tell the right ones.